Welcome. We're going to discuss the connective tissue. Now, the connective tissue is the body's support system. It connects, supports, and holds everything together. Unlike the epithelium, its cells are far apart, suspended in a matrix made of fibers and ground substance. So here we have connective tissue connects and supports different parts of the body. Therefore, it is often referred to as supporting tissue. So here we're going to have justification question, very important one. Connective tissue is sometimes referred to as supporting tissue, of course, because it connects and supports different parts of the body. Okay, and you also can have like blank questions telling you that blank is sometimes referred to as supporting tissue, which is the connective tissue, or you can have it the other way around, the supporting tissue being a blank question here. The connective tissue consists of what? Of course, we're going to have cells, fibers, and the matrix, or the intercellular substance. You can have a question telling you to list only the components of connective tissue, and there are these three. They can also assess the fact that you know the intercellular substance is also known as matrix. You can have it in the form of a blank question, in the form of a definition question. Instead of saying define intersubstance, they can tell you to define the matrix. So it's really important to know that these two terms refer to the same thing. Now the cells of the connective tissue are separate from each other, or from one another. As I said, they're not like the epithelial cells. I've already explained that the epithelial cells can have communication with one another using cell junctions, aka plasmic junctions. But here in the connective tissue, we don't have such communication. We don't have these cell junctions. So this is a very important fact that you can get a question about. For example, they can give you a blank question telling you that the cells of connective tissue are blank from one another. So, and the answer being separate. So they're separate from one another. Another possible question is telling you to compare the connective tissue with the epithelial tissue in terms of communication of the cell, or the relationship between the cells. This is a weird question, but very possible. Okay, they can assess any fact. And of course, we have several types of cells serving different functions. Now let's start with the first cell type, is the fibroblasts. You can have a question telling you to define the fibroblasts, or asking you about the characteristics or features of the fibroblasts, or just write down what you know about the fibroblasts. And the answer is going to be the whole thing. Okay, so the cell type is the most common. This cell type is the most common connective tissues, so the fibroblasts are the most common cell type in the connective tissue. Okay, they're abundant. You can also have a blank question here, so telling you blank is the cell type that is most common in connective tissue, and it's the fibroblasts. These cells are large. Here we're just describing them, so what are the characteristics / features of the cell? And yeah, they're large, with long branch projections, and have a spindle-shaped or fusiform appearance when viewed from the side. Each cell contains a large oval nucleus and a homogeneous cytoplasm. So if they ask you about the features or characteristics of the nucleus of the fibroblasts, it's going to be large and oval. And if they ask you about the features or characteristics of the cytoplasm, they're just going to say, oh, it's a homogeneous cytoplasm. And the primary function of the fibroblasts is to produce all types of fibers found in the connective tissues. So they produce all types of fibers. Okay, and asking about the functions is extremely important. We can also have like questions in the form of give an example for each of the following and the most common cell type in the connective tissue, which is the fibroblast, or the cell that produces all types of fibers in the connective tissue, fibroblast, or a cell with long branch projections with a spindle-shaped or fusiform appearance when viewed from the site is the fibroblast. Here, like just the description of the cell. Okay, it's possible to have questions like this. So again, if they ask you about the fibroblast function, a very important question, they produce all types of fibers found in the connective tissue. If they ask you about the characteristics or features of the projections of the fibroblast, you're just going to say that they have long and branched projections, and they have a spindle-shaped or fusiform appearance when viewed from the side. The macrophages, again, same question format, nothing changing here. So it's either a definition question or a question asking you to describe it or what you know about it, or a question telling you to write down the characteristics or features of the macrophages. So again, it's the same. You're going to write down everything. So it is an amoeboid-shaped cell with short projections, which are smaller than those of the fibroblast. Its nucleus is eccentric, not centrally located. So again, the question, if they ask you about the features or characteristics of the projections of the macrophages, you're just going to say short projections smaller than those of fibroblasts. Okay, or comparison question, like to compare the projections between macrophages, fibroblasts, and the macrophages, they're smaller and they have like short projections, but in the fibroblasts we said that the projections are long and branched and have a spindle-shaped fusiform appearance when viewed from the side. And of course the nucleus, the characteristics or features of the nucleus, we say that it is eccentric or not centrally located nucleus. And they can possibly ask you about the location of the nucleus of macrophages, like here in the format of a location question, which is also very possible. And you're just going to say it's not centrally located or eccentric. And every single fact here, we can have blank questions. Okay, so they're telling you that the nucleus of macrophages is blank located, and you're just going to say it's eccentric, not centrally located. The primary function of the cell is to phagocytose or eat the foreign substance within the tissue, making its role primarily defensive. Okay, so they eat the pathogens, the harmful particles that can cause disease in human. So its main role is defensive. You can have a question telling you that to justify the primary role of macrophages defensive. Why? Because the macrophages phagocytosis, they perform phagocytosis and they eat the foreign substances within the tissue, making its role primarily defensive. Also, another question, another factoid I need you to pay attention for is that they perform phagocytosis within the tissue. So within the tissue, the location of the process of phagocytosis of macrophages occur within the tissue, not anywhere else. Like for example, not in the blood. We have other specialized cells that perform the function of phagocytosis in the blood. Here, within the tissues. Okay, so this is also a very important fact that you can have a question about. Now we have the adipose cells. So these cells are spherical in appearance and contain single fat droplet that occupies most of the cell. So you can see that the fat droplet is very big and occupies most of the cell, that the cytoplasm and the nucleus are actually pushed to the rim of the cell. Okay, so they say the cytoplasm forms a thin ring around the droplet, and the nucleus is flattened. So it is flattened because the fat droplet is pushing it. And of course, it is located at the cell's periphery. The adipose cells store fat to generate energy and help maintain the body's thermal balance by preventing the heat loss. So here again, the function of the adipose cells. Here's the function. Okay, the functions are very important. Pay very well attention to them. Okay, and the characteristics of these cells, characteristic of the cytoplasm, so it forms a thin ring around the droplets in the periphery. The nucleus is also in the periphery, and it is flattened. They can tell you to justify that the nucleus and cytoplasm of adipose cell are thin and located at the periphery due to the single fat droplet that occupies most of the spherical adipose cell. The cytoplasm forms a thin ring around the droplet, and the nucleus flattened located at the cell's periphery. Mesenchymal cells can have a definition question here telling to define mesenchymal cells, or like what are the characteristics or features of mesenchymal cells, or write down what you know about mesenchymal cells. So these connective tissue cells play a key role in the structure of embryonic connective tissue. They are undifferentiated cells with cytoplasmic projections and a centrally located oval nucleus. So they are undifferentiated and they can have a centrally located oval nucleus. The main function of the mesenchymal cell is its ability to differentiate into any connective tissue cell in the adult. Okay, so if they ask you about like what is the location of the nucleus of mesenchymal cells, it's centrally located. Again, the function in adult, it has the ability to differentiate into any connective tissue cell in the adult. When we describe the cell being undifferentiated, meaning that they haven't committed a specific job yet, and they differentiate into any connective tissue cell in the adult. And when I said that they're found in the embryonic connective tissue, the embryonic connective tissue is basically the early stage developing tissue in the embryos before the body fully forms. Now, plasma cells. The plasma cell is a relatively small, spherical or oval cell with an eccentric, non-central nucleus. The chromatin within the nucleus is arranged in a characteristic cartwheel or clock face pattern. The cytoplasm of the cell is homogeneous. So, what is happening here? Again, we're describing the cell. We said that they're relatively small, spherical or oval. All of these can get assessed in the characteristics or feature question. And we said that the cell have a non-central nucleus. Okay, so this is the location / characteristics. And we said that the chromatin within this nucleus is arranged in a characteristic cartwheel or clock face pattern. So meaning just inside the nucleus, the chromatin is arranged in a very specific pattern. It looks like a cartwheel or a clock face. That means the chromatin is clumped into dark patches arranged in a circle along with the inner edge of the nucleus with lighter areas in between, kind of like the numbers on a clock. It's not random. It's a distinctive marker of the plasma cells. So if you see a round cell, or a round nucleus actually, with dark clumps lining the edge in a circular pattern, you want to think about the plasma cell. You can have a very important question about this fact, the clock face and the cartwheel. Like, for example, a blank question, just asking you straight out, like, what is the characteristic of the chromatin in the nucleus of plasma cell? Or they can give tell you to give an example of a chromatin with cartwheel pattern or clock face pattern, and it is the chromatin within the nucleus of the plasma cell. The cytoplasm of the cell is homogeneous, so that's the characteristic or feature of the cytoplasm of the plasma cell. Plasma cells are responsible for secreting antibodies and play a crucial role in protecting the body from infections. So just know that the antibodies are the structures found in the human body to protect against infections. Okay? So it's also defensive role here. They can also like tell you to justify why a plasma cell is considered a defensive cell or has a defensive role due to the presence or due to the secreting ability of antibodies, which play a very crucial role or a very important role in the protection of the body from the infections. Very important question is telling you what is the origin of or who is responsible for, and then antibodies. Of course, it's the plasma cell. The plasma cell secrete it. Question, justify connective tissue contributes to the protection of the body. So here they're asking you about the connective tissue in general, not asking you about a specific cell. And here we're going to say, because connective tissue contains cells such as the macrophages, which are amoeboid shapes and phagocytose or engulf the foreign substances, providing a primary defense mechanism. Additionally, plasma cells secrete antibodies, so the other types of cell we have here is the plasma cell along with the macrophages. So plasma cells are going to secrete antibodies that play a crucial role in protecting the body from the infections. And here we're going to have mast cells. Mast cells are common connective tissues. They're large, spherical cells with a small eccentric non-central nucleus, and their cytoplasm appears granular. So here, the characteristic of the cytoplasm is granular cytoplasm. This is very important because they can give you a question telling you to give an example of a cell with granular cytoplasm, and it is the mast cell. But this is not the only answer. We can also have granular white blood cells that can be neutrophils, basophils, and acetophils, or the eosinophils. They're all granular. Okay? And the mast cell is considered a type of white blood cell, by the way. So, again, if they want to assess all of these facts here, just know that they are common in connective tissues. So they're not rare, they're common. You can find them a lot, like throughout the body or throughout the connective tissues. And they're large. Okay, they're large. You have to know every single description word here. Okay, so they're large. Okay, the size is large. They're spherical. Okay, again, the nucleus is non-central. They're eccentric. Okay, so here, like, describe the nucleus of the mast cell. Mast cells contain histamine, which plays an important role in contracting the smooth muscles of the pulmonary bronchioles. Okay, so histamine also contributes to the dilation of the blood capillaries, increasing their permeability, or exudation, or leakage ability. So histamine has two roles, or two functions. One, they constrict or contract the smooth muscles of the pulmonary bronchioles, and the other function being dilation or dilate the blood capillaries, increasing their permeability. Additionally, mast cells contain another substance we call the heparin, which is a substance that prevents blood coagulation. So if they ask you about the function of the heparin, it's substances that prevent blood coagulation. If they ask you about the origin or who's responsible for histamine or heparin, it's mast cells. And of course, if they ask you about the function, you write down the whole thing. Like, you write down that they contain histamine, and histamine does this and that. As I said, contracting the smooth muscles of the bronchioles, and they dilate the blood capillaries, and they also contain the heparin, which prevents blood coagulation. You can have a question here telling you to justify that the histamine is present in the mast cell in connective tissue. This is a previous question. And the answer is just because histamine plays an important role in contracting the smooth muscles of the pulmonary bronchioles. And histamine also contributes to dilation of blood capillaries, increasing their permeability. In addition to the cell types mentioned above, we're also going to have other types of cells in the connective tissue, like reticular cells, pigment cells. So the total number of cells we have are 8 cells. So the 6 that we had, plus 7 plus 8, this reticular cell and pigment cell. So you can have a question telling you to list only the cell types in connective tissues, and you can mention any one of these 8. Okay, you can mention reticular cells, pigment cells. Okay. Also, the reticular cells and the pigment cells can present as a blank question here.